This is a story about a ticket. Not just any ticket. A first-class ticket. And a woman who, in the span of just 40 minutes, would turn a moment of petty prejudice into a corporate earthquake that rattled an entire industry. Our story begins on a sleek, silver train, its wheels humming a steady rhythm across the countryside. It's a luxury rail line, known for its elegant service and comfortable journeys. On this particular day, among the dozens of travelers, was a woman named Eleanor Vance. She was in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in simple, comfortable travel clothes, a cashmere sweater, dark trousers, and a pair of discreet but expensive loafers. She was holding a single, small suitcase and a first-class ticket to her destination. She looked calm, composed, and utterly unremarkable to the casual observer. But the man waiting to scan her ticket was not a casual observer. His name was Gerald Jenkins, the lead conductor for this specific route. Jenkins was a man who believed in appearances. He held a deep-seated, unshakable conviction that he could tell everything he needed to know about a person by a single glance. He was a gatekeeper, and he took great pleasure in wielding his small amount of power. He saw Eleanor approaching and immediately made a judgment. She didn't look like the kind of person who belonged in first class. Her clothes, while clearly well-made, weren't flashy. She wasn't draped in designer labels or sparkling jewelry. She was black, and in his narrow, prejudiced mind, that didn't fit his image of first-class passenger. Eleanor handed him her ticket with a polite smile. "Good morning," she said. Jenkins took the ticket, his eyes scanning it, then looking back at her with a condescending sneer. He held the ticket up, tilting his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. "There seems to be an issue here." Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "An issue?" she asked. "Yes. This ticket is for first class," he said, as if she was too foolish to know what it was. "And the seat is already occupied. There must have been a system error. These things happen." He paused, his gaze raking over her again. "Look, the coach section is much more comfortable. I'm sure you'll find a seat there." Eleanor's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "That's strange. I booked this ticket myself. I can assure you there was no error. And as you can see, the seat number is clearly listed here, and it's vacant." She pointed to the empty seat in the opulent first-class cabin just behind him. Jenkins scoffed, a short, sharp breath of impatience. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this. I said there's a problem. Now, are you going to take a seat in coach, or am I going to have to call security?" He made a grand show of tapping his radio. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, a silence that felt heavier than air. Her face was calm, her eyes serene, but a faint spark of something cold and calculating began to gleam in them. She wasn't going to argue. She wasn't going to make a scene. She simply held out her hand for her ticket. "Fine," she said, her voice dropping to a low, quiet tone. "Give me my ticket back. I'll take a seat in coach." Jenkins, triumphant, handed it back to her with a final, smug look. He watched as she walked away, her back straight, her stride graceful. He was proud of himself. He had asserted his authority, kept his elite first-class cabin clean, and dismissed a passenger he deemed unworthy. He had no idea he had just signed his own professional death warrant. Eleanor walked down the narrow aisle of the train, past the quiet hum of conversation and the soft clatter of coffee cups. She found an empty seat in the coach section near a window and settled in. She didn't look upset. She didn't sigh in frustration. Instead, she took out a discreet, slim laptop from her bag and opened it. She didn't start watching a movie or checking her social media. She opened a secure company network, and a series of windows popped up on the screen. She was not a frustrated passenger. She was the CEO of Vance Global Transport, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that owned this entire rail line and every other rail line, shipping company, and logistics firm you had ever heard of. And she was on an undercover inspection. Her first action was to initiate a secure video call. The face of her executive assistant, a young, sharp man named Liam, appeared on the screen. "Eleanor, I thought you were on the train. Is everything okay?" he asked, a hint of concern in his voice. Eleanor's expression was calm, but her words were razor sharp. "Liam, I need you to pull the live data for train 745. Now, I want every employee on this route their full personnel files, their past complaints, and their disciplinary records. I want a full history of my ticket, from the moment it was purchased to the moment it was scanned. I want the live camera feeds from the first-class cabin and the main boarding area. And I want all delivered to me in real time, every single detail. Liam's eyes widened as he processed the scope of her request. Yes, ma'am. On it. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned never to question her. For the next 40 minutes, as the train sped to the landscape, Eleanor sat in the coach section, silently dissecting her own company. The data streamed in, a relentless flood of information. She saw that her ticket was, and always had been, valid. The seat was, and always would be, empty. She read Jenkins's personnel file, the dozens of complaints from passengers, all dismissed by a passive HR department. The complaint spoke of rudeness, of condescension, of a pattern of behavior that was clearly prejudiced and discriminatory. She watched the live security feed and saw Jenkins, smug and satisfied, standing in the first-class car, talking to a more appropriate-looking passenger. She saw the rest of the crew, 2 younger conductors and a food service worker, and observed their interactions. They were afraid of him, afraid to challenge him, and complicit in his behavior through their silence. She wasn't just observing. She was building a case. Her quiet time on the train was a real-time investigation, a cold, clinical disassembly of a broken system from the inside out. The 40 minutes passed with a grim, methodical certainty. As the train pulled into a major hub station, its air brakes hissing, Eleanor put her laptop back in her bag. The doors opened, and a crowd of new passengers streamed on the platform. Jenkins was there, directing the flow of people with his usual arrogant flourish. Just as he was about to signal the train to depart, a sleek, unmarked Blacktown car pulled up on the platform. Out of it stepped Liam, dressed in a sharp suit and carrying a tablet, and 2 large, even sharper-looking security personnel. The new passengers and crew members looked on, confused. Liam's gaze swept the platform, then fell directly on Eleanor, still standing near her coach car seat. He nodded, a single, silent gesture. Eleanor walked down the platform, a quiet figure of immense power, and approached Jenkins, who looked at her with a flash of annoyance. "Look, lady, I told you to stay put." Eleanor didn't say a word. She just looked at him with a calm, penetrating gaze that made his smugness falter. Liam approached and stood just behind her, holding out the tablet. "Mr. Jenkins," Eleanor said, her voice low and even, 40 minutes ago, you denied me entry to first class. You lied to me. You made a false accusation. And you did it because of the way I look." Jenkins's bravado began to crack. "I told you there was a system error." Eleanor held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "There was no error. There was only your prejudice. And your incompetence. I have all the data, the security feeds, the complaints, the full history of this train and your part in it." She paused, her gaze taking in the entire crew, who were now watching in stunned silence. "I am Eleanor Vance, and I am the CEO of Vance Global Transport." She didn't need to show him her ID card. The look on Jenkins's face, the complete and total draining of all color, the utter collapse of his composure, was all the confirmation anyone needed. "You," she said, pointing directly at Jenkins, "are no longer an employee of this company. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and a pattern of unprofessional behavior that is an embarrassment to this organization." Then she turned her gaze to the rest of the crew. "And as for the rest of you," she said, "you are all relieved of your duties at this moment. You were either complicit in his actions or too afraid to do the right thing. This entire route has a deep-seated culture problem, and the only way to fix it is to start over. A new crew, a better crew, will be taking over from this station. They will be trained to treat every single passenger with the dignity and respect they deserve, regardless of how they look or where they're sitting." Jenkins stammered, "Ma'am, I apologize. It was a mistake. Please, I beg you." Eleanor cut him off. "A mistake? No, Mr. Jenkins. This was not a mistake. This was a choice. A choice you made 40 minutes ago. And now you have a choice. You can walk away peacefully, or you can be escorted away by my security detail. Your career with this company is over." As Jenkins stood there, a broken man, two of Eleanor's security guards stepped forward. He looked from him to the face of his now former boss, seeing not just anger, but profound, unmovable disappointment. He turned and walked away, the last vestige of his dignity gone. Eleanor then looked at the new passengers, at the employees, and at the world. She held her head high, the very picture of power and grace. She was a CEO, a leader, a force of nature. And she was a woman who, in the span of just 40 minutes, had proven that true power isn't about the ticket you hold, but about the integrity you stand on. She walked in front of the train and finally took the first-class seat that was rightfully hers, a clear message sent to every corner of her vast company. A new day had dawned on the tracks.